Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our discussion today on building a future-proof campus through quality teaching. My name is Penny McCormick. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the Association of College and University Educators. And I'm excited to be here with you today. We have an exciting agenda. I will start with some welcoming and opening remarks about ACUE, and then we'll spend the majority of our time engaging with 4 leaders in higher education, who I will introduce later on, who will share how they are building a future-proof campus through putting faculty and teaching at the center of their student success efforts. So let's dive into some opening remarks. I'd just like to share a few things about ACUE, who is hosting this webinar. ACUE's mission is simple, but I think powerful, right? Ensuring student success through equity and quality instruction. As we started having conversations with leaders in higher education about their student success efforts and the kinds of strategies they were putting into place to meet their student success goals, what we found was we heard many of the strategies that you see around the circle here, really working to create better data analytics, improving advising, career services, working to employ high impact practices, redesign courses, et cetera. And while all of those strategies made perfect and common sense, what we wanted to point out was that we felt like and feel like the quality of interaction between students and faculty was a missing piece and a foundational piece. Keeping in mind too, that faculty spend, if you go to the next slide, Elizabeth, faculty spend more time and interact with larger numbers of students than really anyone else on our campuses. And that's why, no surprise that 4 out of 5 students would recognize a faculty member as the mentor that they went to when struggling in college. And I don't know how many folks are familiar with the Gallup-Purdue Index report in 2014, but they were able to show that when that interaction between faculty and students is strong and positive, graduates are actually 2 times more likely to be engaged in their work and to lead fulfilling lives. If you go to the next slide. So what I'd like to do is to share some of the milestones that ACUE has had since our inception, which was in 2014. So initially we set some evidence-based standards, the core set of knowledge and skills needed to be effective in the online or face-to-face classroom. We also worked to create a learning design for our modules that not only helped faculty learn evidence-based teaching practices, but inspire them to change and utilize those those evidence-based practices they were learning in their classrooms and online courses. At this point, we've enrolled over 14,000 faculty in our online courses, which equates to impacting over 1.7 million students. Our research studies have shown improved grades, course completion rates, and the closing of equity gaps, both by student race and income, across the country with our partnerships. And I noticed, we underline studies here because our studies are of the quality that higher ed wants and requires to respect. We've also proven to provide a 9x return on investment to our institutions, partnering with over 330 colleges, universities, and higher education systems, and then securing some major endorsements and partnerships with the American Council on Education, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the National Association of System Heads, otherwise known as NASH, the Carnegie Corporation, Strata, and Kauffman. If you go to the next slide. What I want to do is really quickly just share some of the data that we're very proud of. This is the methodology that we utilize. It's based in the research as well to study the impact of professional development. And no surprise, I think, to any of you that in order to look at student outcomes, you first need to look at faculty engagement, faculty learning, and most importantly, faculty implementation. And as those change, once you've been able to demonstrate those changes, you can start to look at student engagement, student outcomes, and then finally institutional outcomes. And if you want to read more about our methodology, you can find that in the Connecting the Dots research report on our website. We are excessively proud to share that faculty love AQ, and we don't say that lightly. We say that with the data that you see here. These data are from over 5,000 faculty responses. 93% agree or strongly agree that the course materials they engage with are relevant. 89% would recommend AQ to a colleague, and 95% agree or strongly agree that it's helpful in refining their teaching. On average, when faculty engage with the 25 modules, they report learning 68 new evidence-based teaching practices and learning more about 85 practices. They also report implementing, and this is the key number here, 25 new evidence-based practices in their online courses or their face-to-face classrooms. And they also report wanting to implement more. And they have access to our coursework after they complete the course so that they can implement those 65 additional practices that they indicated that they would like to implement. I'd also like just to share a few findings from a few of our partnerships, starting with the University of Southern Mississippi, which I think you'll hear about more. We were able to study gateway courses and show improved student performance, improved course completion, passing rates, and GPAs in those introductory courses, as well as improved GPA in their subsequent courses after engaging with a AQ credentialed faculty member in that gateway course. At Broward College, we were able to show completion gaps eliminated between Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students, as well as a narrowing of the course completion rates between Black students and white students. At Delta State University, we were able to show success rates improving, DFW rates lowering for 314 of their classes. At Rutgers University-Newark, one of the most diverse campuses in our country, we were able to show improved grades for faculty of 4,554 students. At Cal State LA, we were able to show the closing of an equity gap, a course completion gap between Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students. What's important to recognize in that study is that was a study with cohorts of math faculty who had moved from remedial math to teaching co-requisite math. And then finally at Miami-Dade College, we were able to show both improved grades and student engagement improvement. And that was actually done by a third party, Johns Hopkins research arm. And so I'm excited to dive into today's conversation and to learn a little bit more from our panelists who often have been doing this work. So it is my pleasure, my honor to introduce Amy Chastain. She's the Executive Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at the University of Southern Mississippi. Madeline Pumariaja, I got to get this right, Pumariaja, President of Miami-Dade College. I hope I did okay. Farrah Ward, Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Elizabeth City State University, and John Gunkel, Vice Chancellor for Academic Programs and Strategic Partnerships at Rutgers University-Newark. Welcome all. We are so excited to have you join us today. As I mentioned earlier, faculty spend more time with students than anyone else on campus. And what the last few years have taught us, if anything else, is they need to be ready for anything that might come their way. And that is why each of the institutions that we'll be talking to today has put faculty square and center in their student success agenda, their student success efforts. So what I'd like to do is to start with just learning a little bit more about your institutions and yourselves. Each of your institutions in your own ways have focused on faculty, specifically the support they receive, the recognition of their work, and their role in student success efforts. Would each of you tell us a little about your institution, what you've done, and why? I'd like to start with John, if I could.
Thank you, Penny. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful for you to take an hour of your day to join us today. As Penny said, I'm the Vice Chancellor at Rutgers University-Newark, which is the second largest of the three institutions within Rutgers University. We're a research university that enrolls 12,000 students, about 8,000 undergraduates and 4,000 graduate students. And as Penny mentioned, we're one of the most diverse PhD granting institutions in the entire country. We have no ethnic majority, not even close. We have very complex kind of religious diversity, and about 2/3 of our students are Pell recipients, and also about well over 3/4 are commuter students. So our demographics are somewhat different than many research universities. But we also are very proud of the work that we do, the work that the faculty do with our students and our outcomes. Many years we have no equity gaps in our graduation rates, for example, and we have strong retention. So that's a little bit about the institution. The work that we want to talk about, I think, really comes out of our strategic planning process, which started in about 2013, and in many ways remains ongoing. This is work that we're constantly doing. And we really put a lot of focus on improving engagement with students and outcomes for students, and really being able to support students all the way through. A lot of our initial work was not really directly with faculty. I think that we felt that we really needed to do a lot with the institution before we could make big asks of the faculty in terms of changing their practices and changing what they did. So we, for example, we created a care team, a cross-campus team to support students who may be having trouble, whether it's financial trouble or domestic troubles or housing insecurity, food insecurity, things that might pull them away from the classroom and their engagement with the faculty in ways that faculty don't necessarily feel that they have the strength to be able to support directly. And there was something that we felt we needed to do, for the faculty and for the students. Similarly, implementing advising platforms to be able to connect and receive early warning for students who might need tutoring and other sorts of things. It's a fairly big institution in an urban campus. Communication, especially for, say, an adjunct faculty member who may be new to the institution, wayfinding is not always easy. So that was another thing. We also have done some things in terms of we're a strong collective bargaining unit campus, but we've done some things in terms of changing promotion and tenure to incorporate teaching much more heavily. And finally, I would say the biggest thing and most relevant in this context was that we created what we call our P3 Collaboratory. P3 stands for Pedagogy, Public Scholarship, and Professional Development. And they have worked with our faculty over the last 5 years or so. Including, I believe it's now 9 cohorts that have gone through the full ACUE program, plus a number of mini credentials and other forms of engagement with ACUE. They also run their own programs on things like classroom inclusivity and digital pedagogy. There's a learning community that they've created around that, and a number of other areas. So those are some things that we have done to really support the faculty in supporting the students and improving their learning over the last several years.
Thank you, John. Farah, would you share some of your institution's insights in your own?
Absolutely. Well, a little bit about Elizabeth City State University. We are a public HBCU located in northeastern North Carolina. So much so, about half of my faculty actually live in Virginia. So you probably can imagine where we are. We have about 2,000 students, about 100 full-time faculty, about 35 additional adjuncts. And I would say about 85% of our students are Pell eligible. So we have a very, distinctive demographics. Over the years, I would say at least over the last 5 years, we have engaged in a variety of student success initiatives focused on everything from curriculum reform. 5 years ago, we created all our programs to 120 and created a 15 to finish initiative, We also realigned our academic programs focused on experiential learning is the new direction that we're going in. And even on academic advising, which was a big issue for us, we implemented early alert warning system and really talked about what kind of positive outcomes we wanted to see. And so from all those student success initiatives, we did see quite significant increase. We were able to increase our retention rate by 5%, our graduation 4-year and 6-year graduation rates increased. But what we really realized is that many of our instructors were really focused still on lecturing, and we really wanted to determine how we could more engage our students inside the classroom. And so, I saw a presentation actually by AQ, and it was one of those slides that Penny just showed where the faculty and teaching is at the center. And so regardless of all the student success initiatives we did implement that had seen a lot of success, what we really realized is we had to get inside the classroom. And so in summer 2019, we did join AQ, and we did launch about 30 of our faculty participated in a program focused on teaching and how to improve and engage in effective teaching practices. Of course, 2020 in the spring, the pandemic hit. And so we did have to make some changes, but we really saw great success. Some of the things that we did to reward those faculty were faculty who were engaged in the AQ program. We targeted specific mini grants just for those faculty members that they could use to buy resources and improve their teaching. And then we also actually recognized them at our Faculty Institute, which happened at the end of the semester. It was unfortunately virtual, but we mailed all their certificates and pins, and we went through them each one, and they pinned themselves on Zoom. And so we really try to make sure that faculty are recognized for the success that they are doing inside the classroom.
Thank you, Farah. Amy?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with everyone today and talk a little bit about our teaching efforts. I'm here at the University of Southern Mississippi, sitting out amongst the Black-Eyed Susans and our administration building behind me. We are a R1 research university, and we have a lot of intensive research pressures on our faculty. So it has created a kind of unique situation because our student body is in some ways similar to those you've talked about already, John and Farah, that we have a relatively high need population in terms of financial need. We have a little over half of our students are Pell eligible, and another significant chunk have considerable needs. About a third of our students are first generation students. So we have a lot of students who come from the local area, first generation students. Demographically, we look a lot like the state of Mississippi, and that's the predominantly the origin of most of our student body. So they're coming anxiously to school. A lot of them are struggling with doubts about whether they are, belong in higher education. And yet many of our faculty are coming from high intensity research oriented backgrounds. And, we struggle to mesh those two parts of our institution. And in 2015, we launched a really all-out effort to focus on students' success, which included building some of that infrastructure in the wheel that Penny talked about, really overhauling the way we think about advising completely, building in a lot of aggressive outreach to students who are struggling, launching new living learning communities and academic coaching. But we recognize that, as I'm a professor of sociology here, and having come through, been here 24 years, having taught, I saw that gap in the classroom. And I knew intuitively that when you can't connect with students in the classroom, they are not going to have the confidence, the self-motivation, the perspective of sense of belonging, I guess, that they need to be in college and that they can even avail themselves of these resources available to them. So we really began investing in AQ in a partnership in 2016, and we created something here called the AQ Faculty Development Institute. And we began selecting faculty strategically in the beginning, and then through a competitive application process to be AQ Faculty Fellows. Those faculty then participated in a 3-semester process to get fully certified, where they met weekly with their colleagues, they discussed the modules, and they really built a sense of faculty community. And through that, it became an exciting thing for our faculty to participate and to learn new evidence-based teaching techniques. And then they would become rewarded as their students performed better. They became more comfortable in the classroom and less frustrated. And now we have 1 in 6 of our faculty on campus are AQ certified, and we get more every semester. And we are really having successes with our students by putting the faculty and teaching in the center. So we've seen incredible impact, as Penny mentioned earlier, with declining DFW rates in those gateway courses. And also we're seeing the impact of that in subsequent classes that those same students take. For me, one of the most exciting findings is that the gap between our Black and white students is lowered most dramatically by those AQ instructors. So we see a particular impact on our African-American students, and that impact is measurable over time. So we know that good teaching is making a difference for our students, and it's making a particular difference for our minoritized student populations. And so for that reason, we're really excited about what the future holds here at Southern Miss as we begin to continue to center teaching and get more and more faculty involved.
Thank you, Amy. And Madeline, can you share a little bit about yourself and Miami-Dade College?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Penny, for having me and for my colleagues on, I think, this great discussion around teaching and learning and faculty. I'm Madeline Pumariega. I'm the president at Miami-Dade College. Miami-Dade College enrolls about 121,000 students, and we offer from micro-credential certificates, associates, to applied bachelor's programs, those that lead right into workforce degrees like BSN and bachelor's in data science analytics. We're in Miami. Certainly enough is said about the pandemic and the numbers and the kind of disruption in this last year. But I think what is really done is clarified the lens of how important and what a crucial role our faculty play in our institutions. We can try, and certainly we've all been at the work about redesigning the student experience. We've been at the work around completion by design, closing equity gaps, increasing student success. But I think this past year, what's been clear is that our faculty are really been the unsung heroes, continuing to work in the classroom with our students, helping them get connected, being that lifeline to all of the support that we might have been building virtually through the pandemic, whether it was to an advisor, to a food pantry, to extra academic support. The faculty really became the conduit. And I believe they've always been the conduit that connects students not only as mentors, to the academic learning part, but to the social network. And so I think, you know, what we've done, all of our faculty went through a QE training this fall. We all agreed, how could we agree on like 3 professional development opportunities that we could all go through together? Because it's part of that vibrating on the same frequency. If you're all learning kind of the same area, you start thinking and maybe you start innovating and creating ideas. We also then created an innovation fund for faculty. They could apply for a grant that could help their student success efforts. Where were there gaps that they were seeing, and how could they enhance their pedagogy? And I think lastly, our faculty are content experts. They are masters at whether it's mathematics or political science or nursing. What the pandemic did was accelerate the adoption of technology. And I think another critical role was the kind of technology training coupled with pedagogy and evidence-based instructional strategies that are leading to us enhancing the student success, closing those equity gaps. But I think most importantly, having the faculty feel that we're supporting them, that we know how important they are to our institutions and how important it is to continue to refine and be a student of our trade, if you will, through the process. So it's we'll continue our work with the QE's been for many years, you know, since its inception. Miami-Dade's, you know, been a partner this year, really focused on equity and closing those gaps and enhancing evidence-based classroom high impact strategies.
Thank you so much. And I so appreciate how all of you are indicating, hey, we do a lot of those other student success initiatives and strategies, but we also pay good attention to our unsung heroes. And I agree with you there, Madeline, our unsung heroes who are the faculty engaging with students, especially through some of the more challenging times that we've had. And the other point that really resonated for me that I heard from all of you was, that this is a culture shift, right? This isn't, just take this training and try these few things, but this is really paying attention to teaching in a different way and creating that culture that appreciates, talks about, thinks about instruction and teaching in different ways than maybe we have in the past. I do want to take questions during the discussion, so this can feel a little bit more like a conversation. And my colleague, Kim Middleton, is helping me out a little bit. I don't know if I made it clear to our audience, though. So I do want to welcome questions during the discussion. My colleague will send them to us. So I'm just pausing for a moment, Kim, and seeing whether or not we might have any questions right now.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. So there are a couple, and I'm so glad that you encouraged people, because we do hope that there will be time to sort of pose these questions to the panelists. The first one falls right in line with many things that you all have talked about, and it's this question about how you may have struggled to engage faculty in improving their teaching. And the second one seems related. Has this year in particular, in light of pandemic fatigue, sort of sharpened the need to engage faculty and heightened the difficulty of asking them to engage in that improvement process?
Anybody like to respond?
So I think I'll take a stab at it as we were having that pause. I think you're right. I think there are challenges to sit and say, oh, it's just easy, rah, rah, rah. Everybody gets in and wants to do more professional development. It's like not being a runner and wanting to get up every morning and do a 5K. But once you're in it, you feel good. And I think that's the part. It's providing the opportunity and the space. It's really engaging them in the professional development instead of saying, here's what I think it should be. Here's the kinds of topics we've put in. It's really asking them, what are areas that you think we could bring a national speaker, that we could bring a QE and do a partnership in? What are you really excited about? And I would just say one important aspect, when we opened up convocation this fall, our provost interviewed 5 faculty members, and that was our keynote speaker. They each came up, and we called it like just a kind of one-on-one monologue here with the provost on what they were doing in the classroom, what they were excited about. Sometimes I think institutions overlook the expertise inside and look outside to bring in experts. So I would say getting past some of those challenges is elevating and amplifying the wonderful work already happening within the institution.
Thank you, Madeline. Anyone else on engaging faculty during this challenging time? Amy, I saw your mute go off.
I was just gonna follow up on some of what Madeline was saying. I think it's challenging to engage people. We all have those faculty who are going to sign up the minute you open up an opportunity, and it's the same faculty right over and over again. But what you want to do is find a way to strategically engage people who might not jump at the chance. And I think we're all just people, right? So sometimes you have faculty who don't engage for different reasons. So I think the first thing is to understand why they might not be engaging. There may be obstacles that are there where they don't feel like it's valued at the institution or will be acknowledged in a meaningful way. So for us, when we have a heavy research emphasis, it's up to us as administrators to make sure they understand that it is going to be valued, it is going to count, so to speak, and it is something that they'll be rewarded for. Then you have others who may just not see that it's going to matter to them in any real way in their day-to-day work. So you may want to find ways to talk about it that resonate with them. So for instance, we have faculty who care a great deal about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but may have never thought about how their teaching may be harming our efforts at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So sharing data with them about that can really inspire them to want to know more, to come to a workshop and then use that as a way to encourage them to dig a little bit deeper. So sometimes it's about resonance. It's about making that opportunity seem not so hard for them and something that could be fun, enjoyable, and impactful to them personally. And I think for us, other times it's about acknowledgement, reward or award, symbolic recognition, and assuring them that it's going to matter past just that investment of time, so that it's not something that won't count in terms of their larger success of the institution.
Yes,
Lovely.
I completely agree. Like with, it's always a struggle, I think, to engage faculty. There's just a lot of demands on time. And again, especially at a research university where that becomes a very, feels like a very pressing demand, as well as something that people love to do. And it's, and I think that it's a balance between really being able to engage the faculty and provide that support. I think we've been able to do that pretty well with the P3. I mean, it's a collaboratory that is run by faculty, for faculty. It really creates what our current director, Tajani Henderson, describes as a collaborative community of faculty learners, where faculty are afraid, they can be students, and they can, try things, and maybe they'll succeed, and maybe not. They have colleagues who are in the same place who with them to share these experiences. And but at the same time, it's not just saying, okay, faculty, get together and talk amongst yourselves. There's a need for real support, and from institutionally, in order to be able to sustain this, and points for recognition for the faculty who put the time and effort into to this sort of engagement, and so it's that balance between creating a space, drawing on, I think what Madeline was saying in terms of drawing on who you have inside the institution, and really being able to celebrate and value that, while at the same time providing that institutional support for for everyone's efforts.
Thank you, John. Farah, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the two things I would highlight is one, I think relevance is really important. When faculty realize that you are listening to what they're saying and addressing what they really need help, as opposed to sometimes we think that this would be a great workshop or this is a great series for faculty, but really haven't asked them what. And that's one of the things that I know that we kind of changed during the pandemic. We really listened to them. So they have a lot of input on exactly what workshops and what the programs that we have. So the relevance. And then the other thing I think that John highlighted is really, we found and had a lot of great success allowing other faculty to be the experts for faculty. Sometimes it's viewed, if you bring an expert off campus, that may be viewed helpful, but viewed in one kind of light. And we really found a lot of success letting our own faculty be the experts for their fellow colleagues.
I so appreciate all of your responses to the questions, and again, things that resonate for me, hearing from all of you, include, you've really been creative with recognizing faculty, right? Because it's effort. It's not, as Madeline indicated, this isn't something easy to do, especially adding on to what faculty are already doing. It's extra. And so recognizing that in a number of really creative ways is admirable. In addition, Amy, I really appreciate your pointing out that effective teaching, evidence-based teaching practices are often the same practices that you'll find in the inclusive literature on pedagogy, right? And so it's so helpful for our faculty to understand when they start to utilize those evidence-based teaching practices, they're also creating a more inclusive learning environment, which I know we all want. And then finally, one of my favorite things to say is, yes, faculty members are discipline experts. And so when they have the practices, the evidence-based teaching practices that engage students in this discipline that they love, guess who's happier too, right? Faculty as well as students are having that joy in learning. So really appreciative of your responses. I want to just take you a step further, right? Now that you've all done work, right, made intentional efforts to engage faculty, I wonder if you felt like faculty were more prepared to meet the teaching challenges throughout the pandemic, or even as we move forward, we'll continue to have additional challenges? Do you feel like faculty who are engaged and understand and are using evidence-based teaching practices are more prepared, and why? And let's start with Amy.
And I think this is a great question because we've all had to reckon with the pandemic and really think through what's next. How did that affect us and how will we respond going forward? And I noticed that there were several questions that had kind of popped up about this. And one attendee commented that they'd seen faculty making really rapid strides during the pandemic. And I saw that too. There were faculty who were adamant they were never going to log into our LMS Canvas. They were never, ever going to do that. And it was horrible, horrible. And then they had to, and really fast. And they did a fantastic job. And I was so amazed and proud of the ways our faculty, who had been quite frankly hostile in some spots, not everywhere, just rose to the occasion, did a phenomenal job finding ways to connect with and mentor our students during the pandemic. And I think that our kind of just fortuitous investment in our Center for Faculty Development and all of the work we had done around pedagogy had really set a groundwork in place for what happened during the pandemic, so that even though we had people who had not participated, had not ever joined in with any of our efforts, in every program there was somebody. And that the word had kind of spread that there was a place, there was a group of folks who were there, who were comfortable, who could be gone to, and that it wasn't a hostile place to go. And our Center for Faculty Development is faculty led. I mean, to your point, Farah, that this was not something that was top down, but it was a place where faculty could be heard and they could go and say, I don't know how to do X, Y, or Z. I need help with these things. And we listened to the faculty, created workshops based on their needs. And then from that, we started really creating opportunities for them to learn further based upon what they wanted and what they needed. So based on that, what we've heard from students as the pandemic began was that they really felt like faculty cared, and they gave faculty a lot of grace as they were learning. And I think it was really a game changer. And we started seeing new faculty interested in participating in our faculty development institutes. And we launched one specifically this fall for teaching in an online environment for faculty who do teach truly exclusively online, because we do have a significant online campus in addition to our face-to-face campus. So I'm hopeful that faculty learned things about themselves and maybe will adopt a bit of a growth mindset when it comes to not only themselves, but their students, and see that it is possible for them to gain new skills and to teach in newly effective ways, and that may be something that will continue to affect their professional development over time. We're hopeful and optimistic about that and excited to see where we're going to go next. But there's some silver linings to the pandemic, despite the rough times we've all been through.
I couldn't agree more. Madeline, your thoughts?
Sure. So I would, a couple of things. And Amy hit it right on the spot, right? About kind of engaging the faculty and the kinds of strides that I saw also in the chat. Someone mentioned that we gained because of the pandemic, shifting, moving away just from, the PowerPoint. And someone asked in the chat about the grants, and I want to couple my answer and do two of them there, if you don't mind, Penny. So the grant.
Oh, I love that you're doing that. So thumbs up. Thank you.
So the grants are, you could submit and get up to $10,000 for a grant that had evidence-based teaching and learning practices that either enhanced digital learning, that also had a project base, because we know that students that engage with faculty and are engaged in their academic learning, solving real world problems, tend to do better. Right, and have that, and then the high impact teaching strategies that sometimes in the ACUE training that you might get. What I'd like about that is that the faculty is the co-creator of student success. You're seeing in the chat a lot about DEI initiatives. Look, if you're not disaggregating your data, if you're not giving faculty disaggregated data in a way that is safe in a way that they can reflect, in the way that they can look at assignments and look at assessments, then we're doing a disservice. And what we do is initiative fatigue. And it ends up being the initiative of the month versus really shifting culture and saying, how do we drive student success? Higher education is changing. You know, I'm here to tell you that our competition isn't probably going to be policymakers in the future. It is going to be ed tech companies that come into the space to deliver the skills that the workforce partners need. And we have to be the ones that one, are advocates that you simply can't microwave talent, that having a holistic learner and engaged citizen makes us all better in the world. But how do we do that in a robust way that creates an environment where everyone can be successful? And I think that you do it by looking at data, disaggregating it, not using it punitively, creating a safe space of reflection, and then having a cadre of best practices that faculty can pick from and experiment and innovate with and look at their results. And then you overlay that with real-time student support. I think the passive approach to tutoring, come to a lab, looking at, you know, autopsy data at the end of the semester is not, it's not intrusive and intensive enough. And it's going to require some of that real-time support, and how we do that with our learning support labs that help provide those wraparound services to students.
I really like how you point out, right? The data is key, right? Faculty, all of us, right, need to have the data, but we also need to have the actions, right? We need to know what we can do about the data that really makes things powerful. Thank you, Madeline. John, did you want to add something here?
Gladly. Yeah, so I think that, the timing couldn't have been worse for us. We're in the middle of transitioning a learning management system, which is anxiety inducing for, I think, anyone who teaches using one. We're also in the middle of transitioning our web conferencing tools and pretty much everything else right when the pandemic hit. So, but I really think that what we put in place, it really, I think, really facilitated a lot of the work and made it possible for faculty to respond. Two examples very quickly. One, someone was asking in the chat for me to say a little bit more about our care team approach, and it really is a cross-campus team that involves people from our disability services, from our counseling center, from our health center, from our technology team, from our academic advising offices, our financial aid office, who really get together to problem solve about any issues that a faculty member or anyone else, brings to the surface. And, just given the amount of stress that students were expressing and experiencing during the pandemic, especially the first couple of semesters when we made the transition to remote learning, and people were feeling, I think, very isolated, both students and faculty. And this was a way to be able to I think, really bring people together and enable everyone to feel supported and problem solving about whatever the issue was, lack of broadband connection, losing housing, family members and work situations, or whatever it may happen to be. But also, I think with the our P3 collaboratory, it was a place in which people were suddenly, who had, maybe been teaching in very similar ways in, 5, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, suddenly were, had to rethink, some things, the sort of standard high impact, summative assessments and the role of the, final exam or whatever it may happen to be. And it created a space in which people could come together. And for us, our P3 collaboratory involves, and again, this is another thing in the chat, it involves, full-time tenured faculty, it involves tenure-track faculty, it involves non-tenure track teaching full-time faculty, it involves adjuncts, and it involves graduate students. And, really anyone who is teaching is welcome to participate. And it was a space that people could problem solve and, hey, I heard this works, I heard that works, and really be able to to talk through, what there was evidence for, what people were hearing about, trying new solutions, and trying to figure out how to implement them. So I think that the things that were in place help people move forward and stay connected, which was, I think, so important for everyone, especially in that first semester in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, John, I hear you when you say the isolated, right? Faculty even and students. And that's why, for me, faculty deserve to know the practices, right? That can help students in an online environment feel welcome, feel like they know you, feel like they know their peers, et cetera. So such important work. Farah, did you want to add here?
Yeah, I wish I could say that we were well prepared for the pandemic, but, we really hadn't focused that much on teaching. Probably we're just rounding that area around summer 2019. We did have a director for Center for Teaching and Learning, but she also taught half-time. And so we really went into the pandemic with two sets of faculty that were well-versed on our learning management system. We used Blackboard, and then another set of faculty who may never have actually logged into the platform. I will say the one thing about the pandemic, and for all the negatives that we went through, it really helped us as an institution kind of accelerate where I would say we wanted to go. And it really brought our faculty together. That's where we introduced the peer mentor kind of model for faculty to teach each other. We didn't have that prior to the pandemic. We also weren't really prepared. We only had 2 distance education faculty. And so that was another reason why the peer mentor model really well worked for us. I did see one comment about adjunct faculty. I would say this is another benefit for us from the pandemic. Even when we were offering workshops through the Center for Teaching and Learning, we offered them in a very traditional manner, 3:30 breaks that we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so that's where we ran everything, because of course, faculty could come, there are no classes during that time, but we really neglected thinking about adjuncts and even faculty who taught at some of our off-site locations. But because of the pandemic, and we use Zoom and Teams and those type of platforms, we really have realized how much more we've been able to engage the adjunct faculty, which do play a vital role, especially at an institution of my size. They play a significant role in making sure that students are prepared and that they are engaged in the actual learning. If I look back, I would say that we are definitely much more prepared than we were prior to the pandemic. We don't have a mandate on the use of Blackboard at our institution, but the number of faculty who now use the platform has grown exponentially. I think one of the things that all faculty have to deal with, we were open fall 2020. We've been open ever since, having students online, but of course we've dealt with students who are in quarantine, in and out of the classroom. And so during those experiences, faculty of course have to think of how are they going to accommodate those students. And what I have seen dramatically is that faculty realize that there is a place for the learning management system. And although it's to, of course, help those students who are not present, I think inadvertently it also helps the students who were there in class, but who may actually benefit from going to the learning management system and seeing some of the information that they may have missed initially while they have been in class.
So true, that we're all leveraging some of the technology, right? That we might not have been leveraging before, we're leveraging them now because we learned, and again, the silver lining of the pandemic. Kim, did we have any questions that you might want to pose? I see that you've shared some while we're going, which is perfect, but I just wanted to check in.
Thanks, Penny. There are great questions in the chat. We're not going to get to all of them, but so many of the panelists have talked about their DEI initiatives, and there are 2 terrific complex questions in the chat. So I'll sort of try to put them together. The first one is really asking about where AQ training around DEI and evidence-based practices that support equity work for faculty in the midst of other kinds of equity training you might have at your campus. Is there a way for faculty to sort of, lift that up and convince the administration to support it? The second question, which is related, is asking about I guess I would say depth versus breadth. Is there a way in which having a dedicated small number of faculty who want to drive equity forward, as powerful as trying to get mass buy-in around these same sorts of issues? So two very complicated questions. I leave it up to you to decide how people want to weigh in on those.
Yeah, two important questions though, and love any one of the panelists, whichever question you might want to respond to, happy to have you engage with us. Any thoughts on these two questions?
I'll
Yeah,
take
Liz?
the second one, and I do think we're beyond the 2 or 3 champions. I think you can have champions of equity, you can have, but I do think it's about a movement. It's about a culture shift. It's about, in the chat there says, disaggregating the data. Yes, gender and race. Looking at grades, looking at peers, how as a faculty member did you do a course with all your peers, looking at adjunct and full-time. But I don't think we can sit back and say, this faculty in social science is our DEI champion, but not our math faculty, right? I do think that if we really want to move forward on persistence and completion, particularly of those that are first in their families, the students on Pell are Black students, and close the gap. It can't be a few and in between. It needs to be a coalition, beyond a coalition of willing, but really a culture that everyone invests in time and talent and treasure.
So well said and powerfully said, Madeline. Thank you. And kind of easing into our question 3, which we're obviously not going to get to. So feel free to talk about this coalition of the willing only. I think you brought the two together nicely. Amy, did you want to add to our discussion here?
Yeah, it's on my mind as well. And I think Madeline said it very well. It's a complicated thing, I think, because it is a culture change that I think we all seek, when we're talking about DEI efforts on a university or college campus. And it's really, you have to have that long game in mind, right? You're talking about something over a, let's say, 5-year period of what you're trying to reach, and that you have to do that on multiple levels over that time period. So you have to have, on the one hand, in the front of your mind, that every classroom matters, right? So even if you're only affecting change with a quote small number of faculty, you're still affecting change that's significant. And so especially if you're strategically selecting faculty to participate in an initiative, when those faculty impact first-year students in large gateway courses, that can make a huge difference in the long-term experience of those students. But also, if you really are working on DEI initiatives when it comes to teaching, that's a deep process. It's not a fast process. And we are working now on a DEI Faculty Institute using the AQ modules around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a 10-week seminar with faculty. We have 25 faculty, I think, and I'm co-facilitating that. And we meet every week for an hour and a half to do 5 modules over 10 weeks. So it's a big time investment, but we run out of time every week because the content is deep. And there's a lot for people when you're dealing with content like that. They have a lot to reflect on themselves when you're talking about things like bias and microaggressions and imposter phenomenon and all of that. So I would encourage everyone to think about it as a long arc of progress with small steps in between that matter. Like a single classroom changing matters. Small changes in pedagogy matter, but that long game is additive and it's deep. And I think that over time, the coalition of the willing can spread and grow as more people see differences and become cognizant of the gaps in their own classrooms, the data sharing, they start wanting to make a difference, and then it can spread and that willing group gets larger and larger.
So well said, and thank you for mentioning, we mentioned earlier that both of our full courses engage faculty in multitudes of inclusive-based teaching strategies, but in addition, we do have a new offering, 5 modules called Inclusive Teaching for Equitable Learning that really takes a deep dive into implicit bias, microaggression, stereotype threat, and creating that inclusive environment. And I think, something that's unique about all of our offerings, especially this one, is it's not just learning about the concept, but faculty really need and want to learn, what can I do? And so that what can I do is answered in that offering as well. Farah and John, I want to give you time to say a few words connected to any of the questions or our questions, or even our thought that we might have everyone offer a tweet size piece of information before we move along. So Farah or John, would you like to add?
I'll give my tweet size and my last comment. One of the things I think that helped us was really putting professional development in our actual strategic plan. And so from that, I would say my kind of 2 tweets are, what gets measured gets done, and you can't expect what you don't inspect. So those are 2 things that I think are important when any institution is thinking about what initiative they really want to push across campus and what idea they want to actually put in place to actually change the culture. Beautiful.
Love that. John?
Yeah, so I'll just add, so as you can tell from a lot of the responses, a lot of what we do at Rutgers-Newark is about collaborative and collective problem solving and trying to bring people to the table. It's what we do with the care team. It's what we do with our P3 collaboratory. It's also the work of our Commission Diversity and Inclusion. It is a long process, as Amy rightly emphasized, and the more people that we can bring to the table to be part of that conversation, we know from research that that's how you get good solutions, and that's what that's what we try to do, and I think that's the only way to do it. So and so the more people at the table, the better.
I want to just take a minute and thank everyone who has joined us today. A special thanks to our panelists. Please note for our audience, there is a survey link in the chat for you to provide feedback on our session. We really rely on your input to continuously improve our offerings, make sure they're relevant, make sure they're engaging. So if you would complete that survey, I promise you we will use those results. And again, thank you to our panelists. And thank you to our audience. And I know we've got like 3 minutes. Anyone else? Did anyone put a tweet together, tweet comment that they might want to still share? Amy, Madeline? You're saying no. Okay. All right. So I think what I'd love to leave everyone with is the culture shift. And the need to recognize faculty for improving their teaching practices, and understand too that when faculty, yes, it's effort to learn those practices, but when they do, they really end up enjoying the learning and the sharing and the collaboration with their students more and more. And so if you are interested in learning more about our offerings at AQ, please go to aq.org and you can find out a host of things about our work. And again, I just want to thank the audience and our panelists.